It's Joshua chapter 9. Our best days are ahead, and that's true as a church, and that is true for your life as well. God has been good, but there is more to come. That's the series, Joshua, more to come. But here's the problem, is that there are more struggles to come also. And that's what we see in Joshua chapter 9. We're going to see some truths in this passage that will apply to our lives for success and prosperity. Hopefully you remember the simple outline of Joshua. Chapters 1 to 5 are the preparations. 6 to 12 are all the battles to take the land, the promised land. That's where we are today. So 9 is between 6 and 12. All right. So then 13 to 24, the last half of the book, is the distribution of the inheritance and the land. And we're still in 9, battles and challenges. Challenges will be, and they are, a part of each of our lives. And there's a great passage, especially one particular word in 1 Peter that says, "Do not be surprised at the fiery trials when they come." It's predictive. Don't be surprised at the fiery trials that come. We will have trials coming into our lives. We're seeing it here in chapter 9, and we'll learn from 9 of what we can do when we're facing difficulties in our own lives. So in chapter 9, take a look at what's going on here. Chapter 9 is a classic example. It's a great bad example. This falls in that category of we're going to learn from something that they did wrong here. But same as you and me, when we want to do something for the Lord and we want to have a church do something for the Lord, we will draw attention by Satan, and he can be very diverse in the way that he attacks and brings trials and struggles. Chapter 9. So here you've already had the battle of Jericho. Then you had the failed battle of Ai, some cleansing, Achan, and then a routing of Ai the second time. So beginning of chapter 9, you have a fighting machine. They were nomads for 40 years. These are tent people. They don't live in anything permanent. And they haven't their entire generation. But they are a fighting machine. Before they even crossed into Israel, they had battle after battle after battle and successes. Joshua, 80 years old, is a fantastic military leader. So that's what you have over the side, simmering this machine that is going to start now knocking out city after city, which means kingdom after kingdom. So take a look. As soon as all the kings who were beyond the Jordan, this is 9 verse 1, excuse me, in the hill country and in the lowland, all over the coast of the Great Sea toward Lebanon, and it names all of these groups. But notice the last one, second to the last, the Hivites. The Hivites are actually the ones from Gibeon. They're going to be the main part of the story, but I thought if you're from Gibeon, you would be a Gibeonite, right? Not true. Here they are. All of these groups got together to fight as one against Joshua and Israel. Absolutely makes perfect sense. The only time you ever want to strap up against an enemy with an enemy is if you have a bigger enemy. And then you can get all these kingdoms together, and now you're dealing with a pretty big fighting force. Except, verse 3, but when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and to Ai, they on their part acted with cunning. And they went and made ready provisions and took worn-out sacks for their donkeys, wineskins worn out and torn and mended, with worn-out patched sandals on their feet, in worn-out clothes, and all their provisions were dry and crumbly. And they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the men of Israel, "We have come from a distant country, so now make a covenant with us." But the men of Israel said to the Hivites, "Perhaps you live among us. Then how can we make a covenant with you?" Then they turned their attention to Joshua. "We are your servants." And Joshua said, "Well, who are you? Where'd you come from?" Then they said, "From a very distant country." Well, that was 18 miles away, is their very distant country. Well, they actually had 5 lies in a row. Well, this is what they did. They realized, we're going to have to think different. So let's act like we're from far, far away, but we've heard how amazing you are. Let's pull sandals out from the back of the closet that are really worn out. Let's even rip them a little more and put dirt on them and wear those. They were brand new when we left the house. Wow, you must be from a long ways away. Yes, we are. So they took everything they had. They took bread and made sure it was dried out and moldy to act like they're from a long ways away. Joshua was told, all of this country that we're giving is yours. You don't make covenants with anybody because this is your land. And in comes this group. Excuse me. They never saw this coming. Imagine how it was. This is what Josh was standing there. Well, actually, they were almost losing it. If you notice in the text, they all said, "We're from a long ways." And then the leader said, "Are you really?" It says, and then they looked to Joshua and said, see, that switch? They're starting to catch on. Let's go straight to Joshua. Except once you play that card, you're done. There is nobody above Joshua. So they turned to Joshua, and they just laid it on thick. They used the word servants several times. And because of the name of the Lord your God, that's why we want to be servants. We have heard a report of him and all that he did. And your God is so amazing. They are really laying this on thick. And Joshua goes, okay, like whatever. Why am I taking time for this? Sure. And he made the covenant. He never saw this coming. If it'd been a battle, he had him. He didn't expect that. And I started thinking through the types of struggles that you and I face, the diversity of them. Oh, the health crisis. Yeah, I saw the health crisis coming. I didn't see the relational crisis coming. The parent that says to the kids, I didn't know that we were that bad. I can't believe he left. Never saw that coming. I never saw this illness, this loss. The diversity of attacks here is quite spectacular, but it will be if you're walking with the Lord. Because you're a threat at that point. And once you're a threat and you decide, I'm going to stand up and be a good Christian kid, and once you decide to do that, there will be some mockery. Oh, they didn't mean it. They're just joking. Well, it's not funny. It hurts. As soon as we set ourselves up as a church to make a difference in a community and reach as many people as we can for Christ, as soon as we say that, we become a target. And the challenges are unpredictable. When Pastor Ingram left, I was sitting in his office and I was looking at some books of his or something, and I said, a lot of these books are signed, like by the authors. And he goes, oh yeah, like whatever. And I'm like, so like, who did you hang out with? Like, this is amazing. And I said, can I just start naming names of greats and see if you, he goes, yeah, whatever. I said, Billy Graham? He goes, oh yeah, Billy Graham and I did a lot. We did this, and this together. Oh, okay. Bill Bright? of course. Jerry Falwell, he goes, oh, I got a funny Jerry Falwell story. We're sitting on a stage together, and I can't tell it from a microphone. So I'm going through names of all these people, and I'm like, that is amazing. And I said, any that I wouldn't? He goes, well, yeah, I mean, Mother Teresa. I went, really? Did you date her? And he's like, I did not date Mother Teresa. I said, I'm just asking. I mean, whatever. I just thought. And I said, Billy Sunday? Now, do you guys know who Billy Sunday is? Okay, Billy Sunday was this guy. He died in 1935. I just know that because it's important to the story. He was an evangelist that was nuts. He was a Major League Baseball player. And so he'd walk out onto stage with a baseball bat. And he would point it at people while he's preaching. And then he'd just get mad and he would just take out the chair. Or he'd pick the chair up and make his point. He was just flamboyant. And so I said to Don Ingram, I said, so Billy Sunday? And he goes, how old do you really think I am? I said, I don't know, Moses. I was just asking. Like, whatever. And then he just stared at me and he was like, I said, what, you did know him? He goes, no, I did not know Billy Sunday. Okay. And he goes, but his wife, Helen. I said, you dated Billy Sunday? He goes, no, stop with the dating. He said, stop with the dating. I didn't date her. So he used to do these revival meetings in Winona Lake, Indiana, where Grace College is. He'd have a revival meeting of 1,000 high school kids. And it was all happening. I mean, it's crazy and it's nuts and fun. But up on the hill there was where Ma Sunday, that's what they called her, Ma Sunday. That's where Ma lived. She died in 57. And so after the revival, when everyone's going and mixing, and the whole crew that was participating on stage, they would go all up to Ma Sunday's house. And he goes, oh, we'd be up there till 2, 3 in the morning just laughing, telling story. Could you imagine the history? Ma Sunday. So I Googled her this week. They had 4 kids. Now remember, Billy Sunday died in 35, and Ma died in 57. They had 4 kids. Helen, named after Mom, died of pneumonia, but because of disease, in 32. So she died before either parent. George, he died of suicide at 33. That was before either of them died, Billy or Helen. William Ashley died in a car accident in 1938. Billy had already passed, but Ma was still alive. Last kid standing, Paul, died in a plane crash in 44. 13 years before Ma Sunday died. And I'm like, talk about trials coming. And then I shouldn't have. I just kept reading. I'm like, that's terrible. And I'm just doing the math and looking at it. I can't believe the heart. Some of you have lost a child. Unbelievable. Then all 4 widowers, all 4 of them, since the death, all the way for her whole life, tried to blackmail her, tried to get money out of her, and wrote letters and hounded her for money her whole life. All of them did. I don't want to be Ma Sunday. I don't want to be Billy Sunday. Yeah, put your head above the crowd. Put your head above the crowd, and there's trials coming, and I don't know what they're going to be. And some are invisible. Some, nobody sees them. A loss of a child, we all see it for a moment. Then after a year, we would be so cold as to say, are you over it yet? No, you're never over it. Your life is different now. But now you suffer in a silence. We think of that with divorce. Some of our students, some of you coming from a divorced family, nowadays with 50% of marriages ending in divorce, we'll hear you say it, oh, my parents are getting a divorce. And we go, oh, that's terrible. And then we're over it. You're never over it. You don't get over it. I don't care whose fault. I don't care why it happened. It happened, and now your life is different. You're going to have to live a life different now because of that. Others, no one ever sees it. It's mental illness, or it's a broken relationship that something took place that you can't tell anybody, and you're suffering alone in that. It is like one thing after another, and when we don't expect it, it happens, and we have no idea what's going to happen. That's what's going on right here. And as you and I decide and say, we want to make a difference for Christ's kingdom in my life, we are sticking our head above the crowd. And as a church, when we say, oh no, it's not satisfactory that we continue church as usual and we see just a gentle movement of attendance and there's a slight uptick. No, God's not about a slight uptick. When God moves and the Spirit moves, many people come to know Christ. Lives are transformed. Lives are changed in our own families, with our friends, in our neighborhoods, cities, and world, because it is the life-changing reality of Jesus Christ. But while it happens, there are plenty of struggles. But take a look at verse 15. Verse 15 is when we actually see it happen. And Joshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them to let them live, and the leaders of the congregation swore to them. The deal is done. They were told, do not do that. And he did it. Well, he didn't know. He didn't know they were 18 miles away. He thought they were a long ways away. That doesn't make any difference because Joshua knew somebody who does know. Joshua's commitment in his relationship with God, in his communication and seeking after God, God knew where they were from, but we didn't ask him. There is a movement here that we have to recognize. If there's such thing as a meter to watch an increase or decrease in fear, you could chart it here. Remember, chapters 1 to 5 are the preparations, getting ready. 6 to 12 are the battles. So take chapters 6 to 12, and if there was such thing as a meter where you can look at the feeling and mood of all the enemies, it started off up high in the red. We heard over and over their hearts melted with fear. Jericho was shut up tight, scared to death. You saw that at the beginning, and then if you look from 6 to 12, you'll see this graph, this meter, just keep dropping and dropping and dropping. Why would that be? Because when it started, there was no failure. When it started, Joshua was unbeatable. And then they made the mistake at A. Yeah, we looked it over. It's small. Just send a couple thousand people. It'll be no big deal. And they ended up running home to their mommies. But not everybody. 36 of them never made it. They literally got chased out of town. Well, after that, the hearts melting with fear, they're beatable. You take a great football team. Take the Browns, for instance. No, let's take a great football team. You take a great team or a great golfer that is just dominating, and they are unbeatable. After the first loss, what does that do with all other opponents? It bolsters them. They're like, wow, who just beat Serena Williams? Are you kidding me? Wow. Well, then the next time I get her in a draw, you just wait and see what happens. But they don't feel that way when nobody beats them. So the point here is there were consequences still to the Battle of A. When you and I fail, we still have consequence. You think it's all over. It's not all over. It's still running in here behind you. I want us individually to maintain a humble, broken spirit before God. Who cares about the past? Consequences, you know what? They are what they are. I want us to maintain a humble, broken spirit before God. Because you and I could fail in an instant, and we can sin in an instant. We have to believe that. If there's a pattern and routine, if I have somebody sitting in my office and they tell me about some type of sin that they were a part of, years ago, sometimes my eyes would be this big, because I'm trying to act cool about whatever the sin is, but it's stuff that I've only seen on TV, and I'm like, what? Now it's to the point, and I don't care what it is, they sit and go, this is what I have done. I will always, and I'm going to say always, I will always say the same thing. My first response is always, that could be me. That could be me so easy and so fast. I love you for saying this to me and coming to me. Is that not true? That could be me. That so easily. You and I are capable of any failure. Now, practically, this does work with a football team. You get a football team that feels like, okay, listen, we could easily lose today. Ohio State, you could lose to Cincinnati. No, there's no way. Yes, there is. You keep that attitude, you will lose. Humility and a brokenness. If Joshua, rethink the story then. These guys all show up and they've got the sandals and the wineskins that are all busted, and their clothes are pathetic and all of that. And you get a broken, humble guy, Joshua. He would probably have just embraced them and brought them in and took care of them for a while. Well, we've come along. Hey, listen, we'll hear your story later. Let's get you fixed up and cleaned up. Well, that runs through the history of Israel. They are told over and over and over, treat your resident alien correctly. That shows up over and over and over. Do not look down on them. Treat them well. That has a lot of modern implication, by the way. So as you and I rewrite this story, all of a sudden, Joshua, with a humility and brokenness, would then go to God and say, oh, Lord, I'm bowing before you, these people. They're struggling. And take guidance from him. And rehearse and go, oh, that's right. I'm not supposed to do any covenant at all. Okay, I won't, but I'll take care of them, and then I'll send them on their way. Right? So, let me give you an example. The Apostle Paul, New Testament. If there's anybody who has the right to be overconfident, it's Paul. I am the least of the apostles, he said. Paul. Oh, really? Which apostle wrote more than 13 books of the New Testament? He goes, oh, that doesn't matter. That was nothing. That was God. That wasn't me. Right? You can hear him say it. He says, I am the least of the apostles. Then in Ephesians, he says, I am the very least of all the saints. In 1 Timothy, he said, I am the foremost of sinners. There's the humility. For Joshua to say, I am the least of all these leaders. I am the least of all of those who have ever walked with God. I am the foremost of sinners. And quietly and humbly come before God, he's not going to make this mistake. There were two great characters in the early 1700s. One is the one himself who started the Great Awakening, and that would be George Whitefield. George Whitefield was at the same time, although a little older, than John Wesley, another great revivalist. The interesting thing about the two of them, there's a lot written about them. In fact, there's a magazine out with church history that actually says Whitefield versus Wesley, like it's going to be a fight, because Whitefield was to the nth degree a Calvinist, and Wesley was to the nth degree an Arminian. In fact, Sarah and I have a friend in Tucson, Wrestler. Wrestler has two dogs. One is named Whitefield, one is named Wesley. And so it's fun to watch them fight. And so they're the two, and everyone knew they are total odds, even on the subject of salvation. They disagreed with the who picked who kind of thing, and are you really, and can you lose it? All of that's different. Listen to this quote. Someone asked Whitefield if he thought he would see Wesley in heaven. And this wasn't a joke question, it was an honest question. George Whitefield, will you see John Wesley in heaven? Whitefield said this, I fear not, for he will be so near the eternal throne, and we at such a great distance, we shall hardly get sight of him. Is that humility? George Whitefield said that? See him in heaven? Oh, no. Nuh-uh. He's going to be so far up to God's throne, and I'm going to be so far back, I'll barely get to see him. How's that for humility? That is a trait of Palmcroft. That is continually a necessary trait of Palmcroft. As we see altering and changing and staying focused on our course, and as we stay focused on the course to bring that life-changing reality of Jesus to a lost world, it'll mean we stop doing certain things. It means we start doing a few things a little different because we're dialing in and how important it is when you and I remain so humble and broken before God. I expect battles from out there. We'll take the battles out there. But the battles in here, really? To think that we would actually be against one another because of a policy or something? No, you and I need to be so driven by bringing the gospel to a lost world that we fall all the more in love with one another in a humility and a brokenness, and a humility and brokenness before God. Let me mention one last thing and then we'll be done. The whole story really is built on 9:14. 9:14, this is amazing about some of the genre of storytelling. Today, we'll write a story and we have like a thesis sentence at the top and we know what we're going to say, then we build towards it and boom, we make our point. The verse that stands out here is one that is passing. Verse 14, so the men took some of their provisions, but did not ask counsel from the Lord. And Joshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them. The entire story hinged right there. See, it's the men. When the men took some of their, so the men, Israel leaders, took some of the Hivites' provisions, looked them over. So when they took those, looked at it, they investigated. Well, that ties with the end of the verse. We're looking at this, but they didn't seek anything from the Lord. And so Joshua, not Joshua. No, chapter 1 told us, be strong and very courageous. So this book of the law will not depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night. And if you meditate on God's word day and night, you will be prosperous and successful. This is God talking to Joshua. So the irony that in chapter 9 we actually have the men took some of the provisions, they did not seek counsel from the Lord, and Joshua, you mean he made the mistake? Joshua himself made peace in a covenant with them. How did he lose that? There's a humility that we have, certainly for one another. There is that feeling of brokenness that you and I have to come before God and seek His wisdom. The only reason we don't is because we think we are good enough or my counsel is good enough. Neither one is good enough. We come before God to seek His counsel. He warned them in chapter 1. He laid out the whole book and He said, listen, it all hinges. Meditate on the Word day and night. And if you do that, if you are in this constant communion with God's Word, anything you do, you're going to prosper and you're going to be successful. It's imperative that you and I, and we as a church, continually show a dependency upon God in prayer and the meditation on His Word. 2.5 years ago, Gene Miller, Gene and Nancy Joe, 2.5 years ago, I got a book from him, and he sent it up to me in Cottonwood. He gave it to the whole staff here. Truthfully, I only read it because he sent it. I thought, well, if he really likes it, I'm going to read it. And then when I see him, I can say, hey, I read the dumb book that you gave me, right? And so I went ahead and read it. It's another book on prayer. That's what I needed, was add to my shelf of books on prayer. So in the ministry, you have a whole shelf of praying hands, and then you have a shelf of books on prayer. And so I opened it up and started reading, and I'm just gripped by it. I'm like, this thing is unbelievable. By Daniel Henderson, Old Paths, New Power. I get on staff here and ask around, has anyone? No, not really. Some are reading it, some aren't. I went, this is really unbelievable. And finally, about 6 months ago, as a staff, we started going through it and saying, you guys, this is fantastic. If there's a secret to life and ministry, this is it. Well, Joshua said that. You want to be successful? Meditate on the Word day and night. And as God's Word works through us and we're in communion with Him in prayer. So let me tell you some of the things that's happened. Brent and Maggie Garrison have an 8:30 in the Life Center, an 8:30 prayer meeting that takes place every Sunday morning. Women's ministry, many of you are part of it, kicked off their whole fall programming with a Tuesday morning hours of prayer time. Love that. We all participated in May. The National Day of Prayer was during that month as well. Our junior high ministry, actually, Tyler over here, he's the one that really took these ideas, and he has the role of the junior hires, and he prays over them because he knows them, and so he prays over them. Is that not what you want in a junior high director? I mean, that's it. That's what we want. And it's caught on where now other ministries are saying, okay, how do I do a covering of prayer over our students like we're seeing Tyler and Katie do? My assistant Debbie took the deaconess, as she's just looking at those that she works with, and she has the list of deaconess, which I'm going to tell you, there is not a group better than the deaconess here at the church. They are the most God-fearing and humble group of ladies. I pray over them as well at a different time. She regularly prays over them. I'm finding out, I don't think anyone ever has, as a church, gone over a covering and regularly praying over these wonderful ladies. I'm sure they have, but we didn't know about it. Well, of course we would do that. Why would you ever have a junior high ministry, these amazing students, without leaders praying over them, right? Why would we have a group of servants serving us without constantly beseeching God on their behalf? Our children's ministry actually started by Valine Hayes and then picked up by Jude, who you saw baptized up here. There's a little prayer time on Sunday morning for their ministry. Our college ministry, George Brown, has a once-a-month worship and prayer time out here in the Brick House. Now, our high school ministry, Pastor Jace, a week prior, I was out there, they did slip and slide kickball. I know, right? Isn't that awesome? I didn't play. I didn't want to hurt the kids. The very next week, and he's got 70 high schoolers out there all goofing around having a ton of fun. You need to have Tyler get a slip and slide kickball game going. You could put Grant on second base and see if you can just kind of... I lost track even on my own on that one. I shouldn't have done it. The very second week, the week after the slip and slide, there he is, Pastor Jace, with his leaders and students all out there in a worship and prayer night for their ministry. Isn't this awesome? No, this is it. This is our future. This better not be just a blip. This better be a growing movement for all of us. The back of the bulletin, there's a prayer request or a verse that we pray over our church. It's on there now every week. Folks, you and I have to remain committed to a humility and a brokenness before God, meditation upon His Word, and prayer. If not, we will get tricked by something stupid like he did in Joshua chapter 9. Your family is too important for this. Your own life and career is too important for this. To stay broken with a humility before God and the commitment of prayer. That's my prayer for all of us. You may be a prayer warrior, and I am grateful for that. But we can not only maybe notch it up a little bit, would you consider bringing others along as well? Right out here in the courtyard on Wednesday nights, 6:30 to 8 o'clock, there's a prayer meeting. It's been going on for years, praying for our ministries. There's so many wonderful opportunities for us to express our dependency upon God in prayer.